Yesterday, we had Republican and Democratic primaries in 6 states. To put it simply, Trump's army, meaning the people he supports, his army swept the board. And these results, they prove, or rather, they show a major trend in the future direction of American politics. So when I say Trump's army swept the board, it's really not an exaggeration. So please pay attention to Fang Wei's analysis of this news. I think it's really important for understanding America. That's the first point. The second point is Putin's visit to China. It's now the second day. Actually, his entire visit is only 2 days long. And the relationship between Russia and the CCP right now is truly very, very subtle. They're highly dependent on each other, yet extremely wary of one another. So what's really going on? That's our second topic. Also, the US-Europe relationship. It looks like there's a lot of risk there. Trump is quite blunt when he criticizes Europe. Europe is also blunt with Trump, so there's a lot of risk on both sides. But what's the truth? That's the third topic Fang Wei has for you today. Of course, there's a lot of related news. Welcome to the show. This is Good Morning America with Fang Wei. Hello to our YouTube viewers and our listeners on Sound of Hope, Silicon Valley FM 96.1. Hello everyone. All right, if this is your first time visiting Fang Wei's show, please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. That way, you'll get notified as soon as the daily program is updated. If you're a regular, welcome back, and please share this show. Help more Chinese friends understand the situation in America and the major events happening around the world. Let's talk about yesterday's midterm election primaries in 6 states. What's a primary? Well, it's when each party holds its own election. Now, many people didn't pay much attention to yesterday's elections, but their significance and results were very, very significant. Let's start with the conclusion. In the 6 state primaries, Trump endorsed 21 candidates, though Trump himself says 37 because the media counts differently. Anyway, from governors to senators to representatives, the candidates Trump backed were essentially victorious across the board. So it's very rare. No party leader in America has ever won to this extent, but it happened today. What's even rarer are the details, so I'll go through them carefully. In the next segment, I'll analyze the elections, which involves some knowledge about America. I hope friends outside the U.S. will also pay attention and learn a bit. This is a detailed explanation of the internal political landscape in America. I think it's beneficial for understanding this country and for learning lessons that can be applied elsewhere. Okay, so to recap yesterday, these 6 state primaries had highlights for both the Democratic and Republican parties. I actually should have said this yesterday, talking about what to look for today, right? Today we're looking at the results. But yesterday I only told one story, the story at Thomas Massey. It was about the 4th District of Kentucky, a showdown of whether a powerful outsider could overcome a local force. But there were several other highlights in yesterday's bipartisan elections. I'll fill you in on the details here, one by one, so we can understand how to interpret the results of the elections in those 6 states. All right, and also how I came to the conclusion in my title that Trump's army is sweeping across the nation. Okay, let's talk about the first battle, where Trump's hand-picked candidate is facing off against the incumbent representative from Kentucky's 4th District, Thomas Massey. Now, as for Thomas Massey, is he a Republican? Well, yes and no. To be precise, he's what's known as a libertarian within the Republican Party. What is a libertarian? A libertarian is not a liberal. In the U.S., liberal means the left wing, and because they don't value or are willing to abandon American traditions, I call them the permissive faction. A libertarian is not a liberal. The libertarian faction, which means free will faction in Chinese, comes from traditional American values. It's about small government and big individuals. Small government means government should be limited and individuals empowered. The smaller the government, the better, and the more individual freedom, the better. Is this concept right? Well, yes and no. The idea that a smaller government is better and individual freedom should be maximized actually overlaps quite a bit with American conservative ideology. But there are also disagreements. So where do they differ? Why did Trump issue 4 appeals in 3 days before the election, insisting that Massey must be replaced? How did Massey, as a fellow Republican, provoke Trump? Today, I'll explain this to you. Once it's clear, you'll have a better understanding of the current American political landscape. You know, the concept of small government, conservatives naturally believe it's correct. Governments tend to grow on their own and automatically expand their power. If a government oversteps and turns toward tyranny, it's incredibly difficult to control. After all, the government is the most powerful force in a nation, right? So, what can be done? Well, the American founding fathers used three strategies when designing this country. The first was to strictly define and limit what the government can do. The government can't just do anything, its powers must be clearly specified. This is reflected in the 20 specific powers granted to the federal government by the Constitution. For instance, issues like education, housing, welfare, and even abortion or same sex marriage, these matters of daily life were never intended to be under federal control in the original design. These were meant for the states, counties, and the people to manage themselves. Why should the federal government interfere? That's the first major restriction. So there are only 20 specific areas or powers that the government can exercise. And to be clear, I'm talking about the federal government here, as that's what the founders designed, the U.S. federal government. Secondly, the government's power must be divided, which is the origin of the separation of powers. The executive, judicial, and legislative branches check and balance each other to prevent tyranny. Thirdly, the rights of the people, which were never given to the government to begin with, were explicitly written into the Constitution. It clearly states the government cannot interfere with certain rights, like freedom of speech in the First Amendment, the right to bear arms in the Second, protection against unreasonable search and seizure, arbitrary arrest, the quartering of troops, and the right to a fair trial. No swift punishment, no inhumane treatment, and so on. These are the First and Tenth Amendments to the Constitution. That is, America's so called Bill of Rights. Now, these are all points of agreement between conservatives and libertarians, the libertarian faction. But in my view, the libertarians might go a bit too far because, well, they believe in small government. It ends up with them doubting much of what the government does, denying many of its normal functions, especially in foreign affairs. They just reject it all, like America shouldn't do anything abroad, and I'll oppose whatever you do. That's the idea. Actually, it's similar with domestic policy. If the government does a bit more, they might think it's wrong, violating their libertarian principles. So, how should we really view the government? Is the government actually an evil? Is an evil? Let's ask ourselves that. We need to be careful here because President Reagan did say that government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. What did that mean? It was a critique of the rapidly expanding American welfare state in the 60s and 70s. It wasn't a denial of government's function, right? If you deny its function, why even found a nation or write a constitution, right? So, what should the government's function actually be? To put it simply, it's to manage what it should manage and stay out of what it shouldn't. Now, some might say, Fang, that's just nonsense. What should it manage and what shouldn't it? Well, it's not nonsense. The founding fathers carefully considered what the government should and shouldn't manage. It should manage those 20 items I mentioned: national defense, foreign policy, interstate and international trade, patents, bankruptcy, the postal service, coining money, foreign treaties, and so on, including declaring war. There are only 20 items, so foreign relations, diplomacy, and international affairs are definitely things the government must manage. I mean, you say leave it to the people? What does leaving U.S. foreign relations to the people even mean? Is that appropriate? If Iran develops a nuclear bomb? Iran can already block straits, seize undersea cables, dump oil directly into the sea, and attack civilian facilities in non combatant countries, even their nuclear power plants. If Iran had a nuke, why wouldn't they use it? If they did, one bomb could mean hundreds of thousands of casualties, even millions of casualties. Could the world allow that? Could America? Should the U.S. government allow it? But the libertarians, they don't really care about that. They just reject all government military action abroad because it violates their belief that government should be so small it barely acts, especially overseas. This ideology often clashes with Trump's foreign policy. This is where Massey always butts heads with President Trump. It's what really annoys him. Another factor is just the feeling of it. The Democrats are the opposition, right? They often oppose Trump just for the sake of opposing him. Whatever you do, I'm against it. Then there's Massey, along with another senator, Rand Paul. Both are libertarians. They oppose Trump because of their principles, not just for the sake of it. It's about their ideology. Now, Mr. President, many things you do, I think it's better not to do them at all. So he often votes no. These two often vote no, and the result is they end up voting with the Democrats. Because in the House, as you know, the Republicans don't have many votes. They only have a 2 or 4 vote lead. At most four, at least two. It's very precarious. He also frequently crosses the aisle to vote with the Democrats. This leaves Republican bills in a precarious position, facing potential failure. It makes Trump wonder what's going on with this guy. He's practically a traitor to our Republican Party. So if you keep causing trouble, I'm going to have you removed. That's the origin of this conflict between Trump and him. Now, another key tenet of the libertarian faction is affirming the individual. Of course, affirming the individual and personal freedom are also conservative ideals. But on this point, the libertarians go a bit too far. Because their view is that as long as you don't harm others, an individual can do whatever they want. Oh, really? An individual can do anything? Is personal freedom that sacred? Because while conservatives also affirm the individual, what is the root of conservatism? Actually, conservative refers to conserving one's faith in God, because conservatives believe that humans are created by God, right? God given rights. So God gives people rights. He gives people freedom. But God also gives people responsibility. This is reflected in moral constraints. Now, for Christianity, for example, the Ten Commandments are very clear moral constraints. You can't say an individual can do whatever they want. Of course, Chinese Buddhism and Taoism also have these kinds of constraints. So religious classics regulate human behavior. Although people are born free, they can't do just anything. It's not that personal freedom is so sacred. You can't do immoral things. That's what a true conservative is. This is my understanding of American conservatives. And the libertarians, called libertarians, from what I know of them, they take this to the extreme. The individual is always right, and freedom is absolute. Can it be like that? For example, marijuana. Conservatives generally oppose it, but libertarians support it because it's an individual right. I smoke weed and it's nobody else's business. Same-sex marriage? Conservatives generally oppose it, but libertarians support it because they say it's personal freedom. If a man wants to marry a man, what's it to you? Even pushing further to prostitution and drug use, many libertarians support it because it's personal freedom. So they even support harming oneself to death? Is that personal freedom? So in these aspects, many things conflict with the traditional conservative values represented by Trump. If you go too far, there's conflict. So, what conservatives conserve are God's teachings, values, and principles. Simply put, it's conserving the morality God taught humans while giving people the right to choose freely, right? But libertarians take freedom and free choice to the extreme. They downplay the morality that comes from God in their system. So, that's where they start to diverge from conservatives. Of course, not all libertarians are the same. Don't value morality. Actually, people like Senator Rand Paul and Representative Thomas Massie, they're both Christians, and they hold themselves to quite high moral standards, including his father, Rand Paul's father, who's the founding father of the modern libertarian movement. He's very strict with himself. You know, in Congress, the barbershop there offers discounts, and so does the cafeteria, but he refuses them and pays full price because he feels he shouldn't take advantage of the state. But as a whole, this ideology doesn't emphasize morality. This is one of the main areas where they differ from conservatives. So among libertarians, those with religious beliefs value morality highly because they're self-disciplined by their faith. But many have no religious beliefs at all, and they'll do anything. So the libertarian movement is very messy. It's become a group of what you'd call unruly people. So within the libertarian faction, it's often, from my observation, quite chaotic. For these reasons, there's also a Libertarian Party in the United States. Although it has ideals, it can't really unify because of these issues. So they don't get anywhere. They can't win power or any, public office. They can't even win seats in Congress because it's just a bunch of unruly people. So to be successful in politics, they have to join the Republican Party because their core is consistent with the Republicans, so they're grouped with them, but they're not fully Republican. That's the idea. Therefore, on domestic and foreign policy, they're often out of sync with the presidents elected by the Republican Party. Most presidents just put up with it. George W. Bush, George H.W. Bush, and even Reagan tolerated it. But Trump really hates them, seeing them as troublemakers. He's trying to get things done, and they're just causing trouble all day, so he wants to vote them out. This is the background behind yesterday's election battle in Kentucky. Right. I don't know if I'm making this clear. Give me some feedback. I'm afraid it's too dry. As for Massey, I've told you, he's actually quite religious, and his personal morality is flawless, but he's always been skeptical of government actions. And Trump is the president representing the government. Trump wants to drastically reform the government, including cleaning up the bad guys in the world. So there are many government actions, and Massey opposes them all at every turn. This made Trump furious, so this time he's determined to remove him, to take him out in the primary. So Trump found a veteran locally. This veteran is a retired Navy SEAL colonel. Locally, he's actually a farmer who's never held office, and Trump is fully backing him. As a result, this election has become a national showdown. Why? Because libertarians across the country, with their Libertarian Party branches and donors, have all come out to support Massey. Of course, national organizations supporting Trump are also funding this campaign. In short, the primary in this small district of 800,000 people in northeastern Kentucky has become a national showdown. A nationwide showdown. It's testing whether Trump can purge those in the party who are out of sync with him. It's become that kind of test. Because Trump's own way of doing things is very controversial, so the number of people who support and oppose him is huge, and both sides have a lot of resources, so they've all poured money into this small district. Including the people and volunteers, it's become the most expensive primary battleground in a U.S. House election in 8 years, since 2018. Both sides poured in $35 million. Massey himself put in $15 million. Sometimes you think, how could a representative from a small congressional district find $15 million for a primary? That's a huge amount. Finding $1.5 million would be a stretch. The reason is that this election has become a test for President Trump. Can the powerful outsider overcome the local power? So both sides invested heavily. And the person Trump found, this colonel named McGuire, he was actually trailing the whole time because he's a newcomer, while the other guy has been in office for, 14 years and won 7 times. So at the beginning of this month, he was still trailing. He just caught up right before the election. After the election yesterday, McGuire won 55% to 45%, ousting Thomas Massey, who had been in Congress for 14 years and won 7 times. So what does this mean? First, it removes a dissenting voice from the congressional Republicans. Second, it's a warning to all anti-Trumpers in Congress. Opposing Trump could mean the end of your political career. That's the message from yesterday's election. Okay, well, what were the other highlights from yesterday? Another highlight was the U.S. Senator from Kentucky. On the Republican side, we all know McConnell was the Republican leader in the Senate. But he's getting old, so he announced his retirement. At the same time, he put forward a successor. Now, Trump has long been impatient with McConnell. Trump put forward his preferred candidate, the current Kentucky representative and die-hard MAGA supporter Andy Barr, to take the seat. So it became a proxy battle between Trump and McConnell. It was another test for Trump. Of course, McConnell's been active in Kentucky for 41 years. It's almost like a McConnell dynasty in Kentucky, so it was another battle of a powerful outsider versus a local power. The result? Trump's candidate, Andy Barr, won over 60%, while the opponent didn't even get 30%. Simply put, it was 60 to 30. He beat McConnell's hand-picked successor, ending the 41-year McConnell era in Kentucky. That's the significance of another election yesterday. Third, in Georgia, Trump's preferred candidate, named Mike Collins, a congressman, ran for governor of Georgia. Georgia is a major state, but Trump didn't endorse him. He intentionally withheld his endorsement, letting Mike Collins run on his own. But Mike Collins is a die-hard MAGA supporter. So who's he up against? It's the current governor, Kemp, right? He's term limited and can't run again, So he's backing his own candidate, a former football player. And then there's the current Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger. Most Chinese people probably know him well from the 2020 election controversy, when everyone was saying there were issues with Georgia's election. He came out and said there were no problems at all. Even though he's a Republican, he flatly refused a recount back then. So it was a three-way showdown. And the result? Well, both the governor's hand-picked candidate and the Secretary of State lost their races. Okay, Trump's candidate made it to the runoff, so this is another case of a powerful outsider taking on the local establishment, and once again, Trump came out on top. Then there's Alabama. The current senator there is running for governor, a man named Tuberville. He easily secured the Republican nomination, and he's also someone Trump strongly supports. He's an endorsed candidate. And the Senate seat he's vacating is being taken over by another Trump backed candidate who's also likely to win. The current governor of Alabama is a Republican, but they're termed out. That person wasn't very MAGA. So after this shift, Alabama will have a leadership team that's much more loyal to Trump. So basically, there are many other places. Out of 21 total seats, Trump's candidates won 16, with 5 more going to runoffs. I won't go into every detail, or this will turn into a full election special. Trump himself posted on Truth Social, claiming 37 wins, including some smaller races he mentioned. He was just flooding the feed with win after win, page after page of them. In short, it was an unprecedented landslide for Trump. So let's look at what the takeaway is here. Congressional elections, especially for the House, are largely local affairs. They don't always correlate with the presidency. It's about how long you've been in the community and how you serve it. Local factors are incredibly powerful. Usually, a powerful outsider can't beat a well-entrenched local figure. Typically, the established local politician has the upper hand. But this time, that wasn't the case at all. Trump's team swept the board. Technically, not a single one lost. They won 16 and 5 are still in play. Meanwhile, Trump made another big move yesterday. He loudly endorsed Texas Attorney General Paxton for a Senate seat, aiming to replace the incumbent Texas Senator, John Cornyn. Since the two were neck and neck, Trump throwing his weight behind Paxton on the right pretty much guarantees him a 90% chance of winning. That's how it goes. He's basically looking to swap out Cornyn. Trump tweeted today, saying that the Texas runoff is next week, and we'll have the results then. Which Republican will face the Democrats in November, October 3rd for that Senate seat? A week before the runoff, Trump broke his months-long neutrality and endorsed Paxton. He tweeted that while Cornyn is a good man, he didn't stand by him during the tough times, whereas Paxton has been battle-tested. He's a MAGA supporter he can truly rely on. Okay, so that's the situation. Consequently, right after Trump's endorsement, Cornyn opposed Trump in the Senate yesterday regarding the War Powers Resolution, becoming one of the 4 Republicans who voted against him. It's like he's saying, if you won't back me, then I'll push back against you too. Of course, this Senate bill to limit presidential war powers is completely useless. Even though it passed 51 to 47 in the Senate, it'll never clear the House. And even if it did, the president wouldn't sign it, so it's dead on arrival. So these are just political maneuvers. They don't mean anything. And then, that's the first point. The second is that resisting Trump often means the end of one's political career within the party. Look at the second impeachment. Of the 7 Republican senators who voted to convict, 5 are gone. And 9 out of the 10 House members are gone too. As I mentioned yesterday, this includes anti-Trumpers like Marjorie Taylor Greene and even Lauren Boebert from Colorado. Even someone like John Thune, their positions are looking very precarious right now. As you know, John Thune is set to succeed Mitch McConnell. He had 4 or 5 close allies, but 3 of them are now out of the picture. McConnell will be gone by next January, and then there's Bill Cassidy, the senator from Louisiana I mentioned yesterday. He was also ousted by a Trump-backed candidate. Then there's Cornyn. So his 3 closest allies are gone. John Thune now has 2 options. One is to switch sides because he can't stand alone. He could choose to clearly and explicitly support Trump. That's one way he could show his loyalty, perhaps by supporting the Save America hat. So it's a remote possibility that he might change his mind because of yesterday's primary. Is it likely? I don't think so, but it's possible. The second option is to stay the course. If he does, I'll make a prediction. After next January, he'll be replaced as Senate leader. Because in the Senate, the Republican ranks will be increasingly filled with Trump's people. In other words, the GOP is becoming the party of Trump, or the MAGA party. My conclusion is that Trump now represents the Republican electorate. The undisputed leader, the future trend is that Republican officials who aren't in sync with Trump will fall from power one by one. Yesterday's primary was a signal that Republican voters will unhesitatingly and mercilessly eliminate elected officials who aren't in sync with President Trump. So the old guard, those Republican senators and representatives who've been in Congress a long time, must consider their futures. If they continue to resist Trump, it could mean the end of their political careers. This is what yesterday's primary brought as a conclusion.